Is there anything in the last 15 minutes that we just talked about that's cold open worthy? Because I think it's all like inside
Well,
baseball stuff.
I don't know, but I was weirdly self-conscious the whole time, so that's something.
Why were you self-conscious the whole time?
Because I was thinking about the fact that we were being recorded.
Oh.
No, I think we said. I honestly, I think discussion question. What's your social security number? is a good bit.
I mean, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Whatever.
Let's do it. Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast that dances in the Red Room with Mike Flanagan as we discuss his works. My name is Scott Daly, and I am joined, as always, by the man hanging above my head, dripping water on me. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I got a leak up here in the attic.
And then someone stole a stop sign.
I accidentally drilled a hole through this water main that runs through your attic. I'm sorry.
There's a water main in my attic?
There is. I didn't expect it. That's why I was drilling holes.
Okay. Well, thank you for that information. Appreciate that. I thought you were going to go more with the fact that you're a ghost, but, you know, you do you.
Ghosts are not real.
What is a ghost?
What is a ghost but a wish?
A drip. This week on the show, after wrapping up with Shirley Jackson's incredible novel, we are finally ready to take a look at Mike Flanagan's first foray into TV filmmaking. We are going to be talking for the next 10 weeks about the 2018 10-episode Netflix series titled The Haunting of Hill House. This week on the show, episode 1, Stephen Sees a Ghost. Matt, we talked a little bit last week about how excited I am to get into this with you. This is kind of part of the original design of Flanagan's Wake that I really, really wanted to spend a long time on the show that I watched when it came out in 2018 and fell in love with. I've been wanting you to watch it for a long time, and it's a scary show, so I knew you were never going to do it. So I had to construct a whole podcast apparatus around it just to trick you into watching it. And it's worked. At least we're a tenth of the way there to it working.
Yeah, I mean, good job. Can't complain so far. Yeah, I am very happy to be going on this journey with you, and I can't wait to talk about this episode.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about here right at the beginning, like with this 60 minutes of television. This is a 10-hour movie essentially that we're going to be spending the next 10 weeks talking about, and already in hour 1 I'm like, oh my God, I have so many things I want to say, some of which I can't say, things that are being set up in this episode that are going to pay off later than I, having watched this many times, can recognize and pull out and talk about how clever they're done. Unfortunately, I cannot do that because you've not seen the show. So I'm gonna wait to see if you point out some of these things, not knowing where they're going. And then if not, we will circle back around to them when those moments land. But it was a challenge for me thinking about all the things I wanted to say about this, because yeah, there's so much there. There's so much breadcrumbs in the show for what it's going to become in the later episodes, that it was tough because I want to say these things, but I can't.
Cool.
Yeah.
Get my wheels turning already.
It's gonna be a fun ride. That's for sure. That is for sure. All right. Before we get into episode 1 of The Haunting of Hill House, though, we did just have a quick announcement. Over the past couple weeks, our merchandise extraordinaire Jody has been hard at work adding some new merch to the merch store. We've of course got all of our old Flanagan's Wake merchandise on there, but we've added some Ghost Bear merchandise. We got some do you have a plan to deal with Ghost Bear t-shirts and mugs and stickers. I believe this was original artwork drawn for us, the most adorable Ghost Bear you've ever seen in forever. It's quite adorable. I was going to show it off on the show, but my mug and shirt have not arrived quite yet, so maybe you'll see it on a future episode. But if you want to see it right now, you can head on over to doofmedia.myshopify.com and find all that merch. We think it's really fun. Like we're advertising the stuff because we think it's funny and fun, and we enjoy it, and I like to buy it, and so we figured maybe you guys would too.
Yeah, and if you've got a mug indicating that you don't have a plan for Ghost Bear, then maybe that'll motivate you to formulate a plan.
Yeah.
For the
every time you have your morning coffee, you step 1, formulate a plan for Ghost Bear. It's like it's our version of the eat the frog mentality. We should write a book about this, actually.
Should. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. We would become famous, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, once again, that is doofmedia.myshopify.com. The shop's updated pretty regularly, so we want to check back and see cool new designs and new things. I know Jody is working on some other stuff, but if you want to support us and get to wear cool swag or funny jokes that are only funny to the two of us and maybe 10% of y'all that listen to the show, that's the place you can do it. doofmedia.myshopify.com.
That's right.
All right, Matt. Enough of that. The Haunting of Hill House. Let's get into it. As I said, this is a 10-episode series. It was released on Netflix in 2018. In the way Netflix does it, they dropped all 10 episodes at the exact same time and said, binge them, go. And we did. A lot of people did. This was, I think we kind of talked about Flanagan and how I came to know him as a filmmaker. Like I saw Gerald's Game when it first came out, and I saw Oculus without knowing that was Flanagan. This was the thing, I think, that the first thing that I started paying attention to, like the name of the person who made it, because I sat down and watched the show. And so my wife is like you. She does not like to watch scary things. And so I watched this show alone at night in bed. I was watching it on the TV, but I was very afraid that she would like wake up and get scared because of all the scary noises and screaming and et cetera from the show. And so I was wearing headphones. I was wearing over-ear headphones similar to these that were connected to my Apple TV. And so I was watching on the TV across the room, but the sound was just right here. And it was a very rewarding and terrifying experience for me. And I just absolutely loved the show. And it was great watching it that way in the night, in the dark.
That sounds like a perfect experience. And see, my strategy has been, I've discovered that if I have every light in the house on, then I'm able to watch Mike Flanagan's content. I figured that out. So we both have our own preferred methods, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I will say, like, I've seen this episode many times. I watched this episode, I think 4 times in preparation for our recording here today. The scary parts still kind of get you. There's moments where you're still kind of like, okay, I'm going to look away from the screen conveniently. Not because I'm scared, just I want to look over there for a little bit. And so I think that there's scarier parts in the show. Sorry to say, Matt. But this episode has its definitely frightening moments for sure.
So I just wanted to comment on that I watched the episode twice in preparation for this conversation. And both times, despite the second time completely knowing what was going to happen, in that last, the last shot of the episode, all the hair on my body stood up. Like, oh yeah. And it's not even like, oh, scared, it's not a jump scare, really. It's really not a jump. I mean, it's a borderline jump scare because you see his reaction before you see her, but it's uncanny and it's unsettling. That's why I think I reacted to it. I don't know, this is why I love Mike Flanagan as a filmmaker is he's able to impact you on that deeper level, right? I can't even really put my finger on why that is so unsettling that I can't. I mean, how many times in a person's life does all your hair stand up? That doesn't happen to me very often when I'm watching scary things.
Well, and I think it's because, and there's plenty of examples in everything we've talked about, but especially in this episode, is that he plays with the slow realization of the truth moment. Like, I think the reason why, and we're jumping to the very end of the episode first, which is totally fine with me.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why your hair stands up in that moment, because the way it's constructed, the way Flanagan shoots the scene is he gets the phone call, he's talking to Hugh on the phone, who says Nellie's dead. You can still see her out of focus in the background when he says that, and you have that realization moment of like, oh fuck. And then he turns and she's gone, and then suddenly right in front of him she's moved, she's teleported essentially. And then, yeah, Flanagan's not done. It's not just that she's standing there. It's then her irises fade out, her skin changes color, and she does that terrifying scream. And we're gonna have so much to say about Victoria Pedretti, who plays Nell throughout the course of the show and even this episode. She pulls off that terrifying look so well. Like, honestly, I have it up on my second monitor right here because I was making the show art right before we started, and I used that moment for the show art. And so I had the episode paused at that moment, and it's just here. And while I was working on the Photoshop for it, like, it was just in my periphery, and it was fucking me up because it's just scary. It's just a scary, like, the way she contorts her face and the way the makeup helps assist that to make it more scary. It's very, very effective.
Yeah. But it's not scary in the, like, it's not an aggressive ghost scary. It's like it's scary because it's sad and she's scared, right?
Yeah.
It's like she's scared of something, and that's resonate with it.
That's the great realization of the moment, actually, is especially when you go back and watch the episode again. When you first seeing it, you see her standing there in his room when he walks in, and she's not saying anything. She has this confused look on her face, but you're fully in Steve's point of view at that moment, where you're just like, oh, he's just frustrated and mad, and seeing her here actually makes him more frustrated and mad. But on the second viewing, you really start to pay attention to what she's doing, and she's like looking around confused to where she's like, she's not even sure why she's here right now. And there's a lot of questions there that will have to be answered, but it really, I mean, like the reason why the moment works and the reason why the moment is scary is not just the makeup look, and it's not just the acting, but it is that over the past 60 minutes, everything has been about what's wrong with Nell, what's going on with Nellie, a character that we've all just met, and now suddenly we know, like, some people were very worried about her, and some people were kind of indifferent to her plight, and now she's dead. And that's the inciting incident of the show, is that Nell has died, and now what's going to happen next?
We've seen everyone's sort of reactions dancing around this, and then we've also interwoven with that seen young Nell, who is just adorable and lovable, and that makes it super tragic, I think. I think that weaves in an element of emotionality that wouldn't be present if we didn't have the childhood timeline.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit and go back. Just wanted to state here that all 10 of these episodes are directed by Mike Flanagan, which is not true for all of his television work. It is true for this. He is the credited writer on 4 of the 10 episodes, this one included. But he had a writer's room for the show, so, like, I don't know if we've talked about on the show, like, how writer's room work, but, like, it's a collective effort from everyone involved to write the episodes. Usually, like, there's an assigned writer for each episode that will go back and actually, like, do the work of typing it up and formulating it and bringing it to the group and discussing it, and that usually is the person who ends up being the credited writer, which is to say, like, he's the credited writer on 4 of the episodes, but I think Mike Flanagan's DNA is over every little bit of this show. He's the showrunner, even on the episodes he didn't quote unquote write himself. He also the editor. Once again, this is what he does. And yeah, so a 10 episode, 10-hour long horror adaptation on Netflix. It's kind of remarkable, not only that this was as good as it was, but also, like, broke through in a way, because I do think this is something that raises the cultural awareness of Mike Flanagan and leads to him continuing to get more and more work. It's horror shows are hard because like a horror movie, it's not that a horror movie is easy, but like you can maintain a level of scare, a level of tension. Can you maintain that level of tension for 10 hours? The answer is no, but
Right.
you just do something different. You take this property and do something a little bit different with it.
Yeah, it's funny. The only horror shows I can even really think of are all episodic, like X-Files or something. But maintaining a plot line where you have to keep the scares coming without relieving the tension,
Yeah.
While keeping the ball moving narratively, that does sound really challenging.
Yeah. So, but before we get into a little bit more of the show, I did want to ask you the question, like, what were your expectations going into this? So obviously we just finished reading the book and I had mentioned that the show was a loose adaptation of the novel. I think you understand what I mean now here, even in the first episode. But like, did you have any cultural osmosis about this show at all? What kind of expectations did you have going into it? What was your thoughts when you sat down to boot up the first episode?
I guess I didn't have much. It's funny. If you'd asked me before this, I might have said, "Yeah, I've culturally osmosed some things." But the fact is, I think I didn't, because I was still expecting it to be a more straightforward adaptation of the premise of, there's a haunted house and a group of people gets invited to the haunted house to investigate it. Like that. That's the one line description of Shirley Jackson's novel.
Mm-hmm.
Although not nearly an adequate description, obviously.
Sure.
But this is not really doing even that, right? Even the element of like group comes to the haunted house. It's like, well, the family came to the haunted house originally as children, and then I have a guess that they're all going to come back to the house as adults. That hasn't happened yet, but so that's a guess. And I guess to the extent that there's cultural osmosis, I feel like I've seen trailers where it showed those actors in a scary building. So that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a safe assumption. Yeah.
But that's about it, really. I don't know. I don't really know what exactly we're going to do with this story.
I think that's very cool, and it makes sense because I think probably one of the challenges when you sat down like to write this, when Flanagan sat down to write this and break this story, is like it's a 200-page book with 4 characters. Essentially, there are a few more characters, but essentially 4 characters, and it's like we can't do that in an episodic form. Like we can't do that. Like it's they made a movie in 1963. We talked about it a little bit last week. I think it's an excellent film. It's a great adaptation of that book, while still kind of not containing everything that the book has in it. But it's like, how do you expand that out to 10 hours? How do you expand that out? How do you make it television? Because television and movies are very, very different. How do you turn that book into television? And the solution that Flanagan came with here was essentially, I think it's been described as like an echo of Shirley Jackson's novel, a remix of Shirley Jackson's novel. It takes some of the themes and ideas and even some of the imagery of the book, but it like remixes it to tell a story that Flanagan wants to tell. And what I was hinting to you at last week about how, like, to me, this is like a culmination of everything he's been doing in his entire career. It's like, it's a story about family. It's a story about family trauma and the past. It's a story like it is very easy to see Oculus as kind of a prototype for the show, right? You can probably already see that in the first episode where this horribly traumatic thing happened to this family when they were all children, and now they've all grown up and clearly are not over it and are going to have to confront that trauma in some way.
And everything's going to turn out fine for them, just like the characters in Oculus, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
One of them's already dead, Matt. And so, it just feels like the themes that he really likes to explore, the ideas, the challenges, even like the camera work, all of it seems to be culminating in this big 10-hour movie that is The Haunting of Hill House.
I think one point we were going to get to, so why not mention it now, is just like one of Flanagan's repeatedly one of the motifs that he likes to return to, or one of the thematic ideas he likes to return to, is confrontation with the supernatural and sort of trying to pull the supernatural into a rationalizable frame.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
in various of the movies we talked about, you've got characters who are they think they figured out the trick, and they're gonna get one over on the supernatural, and it never works out for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the idea of not ever really being sure or rationalizing or resisting the idea of the supernatural. And these are things we talked about totally separately in context of the book, where you have Montague and Mrs. Montague, who in sort of different ways are trying to apply the scientific method to Hill House, both very poorly. And we made fun of them for that. But then we sort of actually came around to the point of like, well, what if there's just no way to actually figure this out, because it defies our sense of rationality.
Yeah.
And then okay, so that all connects here, where we have this whole first episode is focusing on the character of Steve, who embodies this idea.
Yep.
And I love how it works too, where it's not just like, oh, that's just his character trait. It's like, no, it's because of the story. Because when he was a kid, this weird, terrifying thing happened to him. His mom killed herself. His dad said that it was because of ghosts or something, unclear at this point. Now, his whole life has apparently been a series of repeatedly going to investigate a supernatural story, certainly finding out that it was fake, and basically figuring it out, like we see him do in this episode, where he figures out it's like, they moved the stop sign and you've got a leak. Sorted it out, and then he goes ahead and he writes the fictional version of it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that ties in so perfectly with both the thematic stuff we were doing in Haunting of Hill House, the book, and then also just this idea that Flanagan has brought to many of his movies so far.
Yeah, I mean, I love Steve as a character. I really, really do. Named, by the way, after Steven Spielberg, whose Amblin Entertainment is what produced this, owned the Haunting of Hill House property and co-produced this show. Also produced the 1999 abomination of a film that I don't think is very good. But Steven Spielberg really, really loves Shirley Jackson's novel, and Flanagan kind of honored him in the naming of the character of Steve. Also the naming of the character Shirley. Shirley Jackson.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have our three Crane children that are named after the characters from the book, right? We have Luke, Nell, and Theo, and then we have our two additional Crane children that are named after Steven Spielberg and Shirley Jackson herself, which is perfect. I really do deeply love Steve as a character, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say to you that kind of the structure of the early part of the show, at least of the first 5 episodes, and I won't say anything beyond that, is that each of the Crane children get the spotlight for each of the 5 episodes that begins this 10 episode arc. And this is Steve's. This is the one that you would not be wrong to take away from the pilot here that Steve is the protagonist of the show. Because he certainly feels like the focal point of this episode. Like we are primarily following him through the journey of the episode, and we ping off other characters and go see other things, but it's mostly from his perspective. And that's because this is his episode. And so, and it is like, just thinking about, and this is a conversation that'll probably have to fully wait until we know more details about all the other Crane children. But like, it is really interesting by starting with Steve and by making Steve the first episode and the titular character of this episode, we are kind of laying our cards on the table very specifically about what type of show this is going to be like, right? You're so right. This idea of this is a guy who, this is a story that takes place post haunting, right? Like the haunting of Hill House in the title has happened already. It happened when they were children and they ran away. And now we're seeing years and years later what that has done to them. How has it changed them as people? Who are they now? And then they're going to be forced to reckon with that as their sister dies, and we'll see what happens from there. But as a skeptic, as a person who has spent his life originally like exploiting the stories of his family, which is another wrinkle I just absolutely love that we get to see in this episode, that he wrote this book. And at least Shirley, we haven't seen the way the rest of the family reacts to it, but at least Shirley was vehemently opposed to him doing this, and he did it anyway. And I love the book, the show is very clear. Like, it lays it all out for her. She says point blank to him, like, you know how I feel about this. You know the cost if you publish it, and he does it anyway. And it's really, I want to ask you about Steve and his writing, because the opening lines of this episode, the opening lines of the show, are the opening lines of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. It's Steve reading those opening lines, Hill House not saying yada, 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 whatever walked there, walked alone. Which, as we talked about when we read the book, gorgeous, incredible writing. Like, just the best opening of a book ever, possibly. In the context of the show, that's Steve's writing at the beginning of the first novel, or first story he wrote, The Haunting of Hill House. However, I don't get the impression that Stephen Crane is a very good writer. And I'm curious how you feel about that.
I think this show is essentially trying to communicate that to us, where it's probably sort of embarrassing to be a Stephen Crane fan in the world of the story. Like, there's all the little touches, just like the way the books are kind of bound with the particular design philosophy of the covers. It tells you a lot about, like, who this is marketed to, how this is being marketed, not being marketed as literature. It's the sort of, I mean, they're essentially being marketed as true stories is the thing, and so he's passing these things off as if they're true, probably with a little wink and a nod, where his character, his readers are, if they're, you never really know, actually, is the truth, because what I was going to say is his readers are probably in on the joke. But
I mean, it didn't seem like Mrs. Walker was in on the joke. It seemed like she had fully bought it.
Exactly. It feels a little exploitative, actually. I mean, you mentioned that he's sort of cashed in on his family's trauma. He sort of exploited his family in the first place. I think he sort of exploits his readers. I think I don't know. This is me coming out swinging here, but I think the kind of person who writes these, like, the supernatural is real, and here is a story of the supernatural that I'm going to pass off as real, even though I'm making up 95% of this. I think that's exploitative, because people will believe that, and it's not true. So I it's really interesting to juxtapose that with the idea that Steve is actually, like, dispositionally, he's this skeptic debunker who then goes on to write these stories where it's almost like he wishes that it were true.
Yeah, but you're right. It's so exploitative, because it's almost worse that he doesn't believe the shit he's peddling. Like, he clearly doesn't believe in it, and he's doing it anyway, because like, this is his ticket, this is his path. Like, I love the line when he's arguing to Shirley, where he just says, the novels aren't selling, Shirl. Like, he's just a failed writer. And then someone heard, like, you can almost imagine, it's not in the episode, but you can almost imagine the conversation with the agent that he was submitting these subpar novels to, who said, like, wait, you were the kid that was in the most famous haunted house in America? Just write about that. And he's like, I don't know. I don't want to be that kind of writer. Yeah. It's like, just do it. And I can promise you I can sell that book.
Yeah.
And then they did. And so he fell down this out of desperation or desire or want. And then, has made it his career to just keep churning out these subpar books about stories that he knows are false or embellished, and doesn't believe in himself, and has this. This is one thing about Steve I really wanted to talk about, is his kind of cockiness and his absolute certainty that he understands how all this stuff works. Like, so many of the conversations with Mrs. Walker I loved throughout the course of this episode. I really loved the one where he was talking about paranormal or supernatural versus preternatural.
Yeah.
Like he just comes off as such an asshole
Right.
there.
And the way she ends the conversation of, oh, okay. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. And of course, the great thing about the show is that even the title says it, he's wrong. I mean, okay, so he was probably right about Mrs. Walker and her husband. Like everything he says there, he was probably correct that this was a leaky ceiling, a car horn outside, and the human brain has this incredible power to make stuff up, right? He was probably right there, and he's probably been right a lot of times in debunking these other stories. But he's wrong here.
Yeah.
There were ghosts in Hill House, right? Like we've seen them already in this episode. Nellie is being haunted by some ghost, and it's fucking her up big time. Something happened in that house that several members of the house believe was supernatural. And then at the end, we see Nell the ghost standing in front of him. So like all his assurity and cockiness about the way the world works and he's got it all figured out, it's all bunk. It's all wrong.
Yeah. Just one note, you mentioned the crooked neck lady, the bent neck lady.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how I was just, that's one of those things where you don't really know what it means yet, but it does remind me of the novel where, we had I believe it was the companion of one of the daughters.
Yeah.
Who had, I forget if she hanged herself or if she threw herself from the tower.
She hanged herself, yeah.
Which would give you a bent neck, right?
It would do that. Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking. But we haven't explicitly made the connection to like, oh, horrible things happened in the house before.
Mm-hmm.
But I assume we'll, get to that one way or the other.
Yeah.
I wanted, sorry, just like before we move on from the moment you were talking about where he said, the novels aren't selling. There's like a cool kind of through line that I don't know if I'm pattern matching cloud shapes here, but he says, I believe he says, with the advance, we could buy a house.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's a way of indicating, oh, it's a lot of money, but that's also just a literal, the word house. It's a house. It's the Haunting of Hill House. He's going to get a house, and then they do get a house, and then his father tells Nell to go to the house, and they all assume that they're talking about that house, the house that he buys with the money, with the money that he got from writing about Hill House, but it's not that house. I'm saying house a lot, but the point is like this is sort of a symbol. The idea that he's going to buy. I don't know if I'm on anything at all here, but like the idea of the house as a symbol, they're going to replace the house with a different house, but that house is also kind of cursed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I think you're implying this, but you haven't said it directly, is that like he's doing this for the sake of his family, family being him and his wife, Lee, played by Samantha Sloyan. Again, we get to see her again. There's a lot of recurring Flanagan characters in the show, of course.
Yeah.
And then we get to see after that effect that their marriage has dissolved, like that. Yeah. When Hugh is trying to send Nell to Steve's house, he sends Nell to Lee's house, and there's that great phone call where she says, "My house," and he goes, "The house."
House, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that too, because it's once again, it's like every time we say this word. Honestly, part of the reason why I'm making a big deal out of this might be the fact that if we were talking about a different book, then every single time we said the word, it would be highlighted in blue, and of course referencing
House of Leaves.
The House of Leaves, where the word house in that book is a huge, like, potent symbol.
No, you're so right. And another kernel of this I want to introduce to you is something you didn't actually get to see. So let me just set the stage for this, is that there is a director's cut of this episode that is only available on the disc, because 2018, the forever ago pre-pandemic times, Netflix wasn't as fully committed to their we're not doing physical media, everything's just going to live on our service thing. And Mike Flanagan was able to negotiate with them to do a physical release of The Haunting of Hill House. So I have the discs. The discs have a few commentary tracks for a few episodes, including this one, and they do have some director's cuts for a few episodes, including this one. And there were things cut from this episode for the Netflix version, things that they cut for pacing, or just like the incredible fear that in your pilot episode people will turn it off and you need to propel them through the episode. I want to spend some time talking to you about pilots and this pilot in particular structurally. But anyway, one of the scenes that was cut is at the very beginning of the show. You know, you have Henry Thomas's young Hugh Crane calms Nellie down after she's woken up. He goes back to bed and then lays down in bed next to Carla Gugino, who plays Liv, which, by the way, I don't know if you had any difficulty with that idea coming almost directly from Gerald's game, where those two characters are now playing husband and wife. There was a second there the first time I watched when I was like, oh, I don't know if I like that.
I think it's a testament to his acting that I didn't, because I just saw him as this new guy who's a good father. And
yeah. So there was that scene where they're both laying down in bed talking to each other, and it's a great scene because Flanagan shoots it overhead and there's no cutting. It's just them and talking in bed. It was a lot longer in the original cut and they had to trim it down. And a lot of what's talked in there is, first of all, I love it because we get to see one thing we haven't seen in the show yet is like the loving relationship between Liv and Hugh. Like we know Liv dies and that's part of the incident that they flee the house, but we haven't seen what their marriage is like very much. And this scene that ended up getting cut kind of defines what their marriage is like, where they're very sweet to each other and talking about what the experience of living in the house and talking about flipping the house. And they just replaced all the old pipes with newer pipes that shouldn't be making these noises, and the frustrations with that. And the reason for bringing all this up that I'm finally getting to is one of the things he says to her in this bed moment is, if this thing flips like I think it's going to, the next thing we get to do is buy our house, buy our forever home. And so I think that perfectly ties into what you're talking about, like this idea of how motivational of a force is the idea of getting your place, getting your house, getting your home, a place where your family lives, a place where your family is protected, a place to call your home, and how motivational that is for all of our characters. And yet, you know, ironically, it is this house that destroyed this family and sent them apart. They live, you know, that's one thing we see, all the adult children, they live all the way across the country. Some of them live in Massachusetts, some of them live in Los Angeles. I think the dad lives down in Florida. They are scattered to the winds and as far away from each other as almost possible. And so I think that's a really acute observation you had there. And sorry for my long-winded explanation to tell you another way that links up with the show.
I mean, I didn't feel too confident about it, but now I feel a lot stronger. And as you were talking, I was realizing, you know, most of the family members that we do see, I might be missing some, I might be just forgetting something, but they don't seem to be living in houses. They seem to be living in apartments, or like a funeral home, or the shed behind a funeral home.
Yeah.
Or like none of them really seem to be just in a normal house situation, almost as if they're avoiding that.
You're right. No, totally. I love it. I love it so much. I do want to talk about, I think this is a great place to talk about pilots, because a thing happened to me while I was watching this episode. And I think it's just like when you watch the same episode of TV enough, you like start to pay attention to the things outside of just what is happening in the beat to beat moments. And I think what I realized is the structure of how this episode works is actually just really, really smart. And I want to talk about this because pilots, man, are so hard. Like I actually one day I'll do this. I want to do a whole show that is just watching pilots and talking about the pilots, you know, successful pilots, failed pilots, this whole thing. But the concept of a pilot is the degree of difficulty is so high, because you have all these things you have to do. You have to introduce your characters and your world and set up your story and then execute on your story. The inciting incident probably needs to happen in the pilot. But you also need to hook people, right? It has to be interesting enough, because TV, unlike like movies, yeah, you can kind of quit in the first 15 minutes of movies, but the thing about TV is it has exit ramps every hour or so that you can bail on, and you don't want people to bail on it. So you need to hook them within that first 60 minutes. You need to make them care, but also you're trying to sell the show to a producing company that's going to pay for it. And so you need to demonstrate to them why this is a show worthy of spending money on. And it's so hard. And it's so hard to do this in a way that feels propulsive and fun, and not just, we need to do exposition, we have to go through XYZ just because we have to set all this stuff up, and then the episodes after it'll be good. And it's I will say that, like, this is not my favorite episode of the series. Like, the reason I really fell in love with the series is to come still. But I do think this episode does a remarkable job of using its structure to set up everything we need to do while still giving us like our just expertly metered out scares. But also like think about it here. How many characters do we have to set up in this freaking pilot? We have 60 minutes to define 5 kids, and then their 2 parents. But we don't just have to define the 5 kids, right? Because we have to define the 5 kids as they were as children, and then comparatively as they are as adults, which is in some cases very much changed because of the experiences they went through. And then the side characters as well, and then how they interact with each other. And we need to do, like, the way I love the structure is, how do we organically like pass the baton between each of these characters throughout the course of the episode? And we do it kind of really cleverly, where like Nell is the inciting incident of the story, and so all of the passing of the baton revolves around Nell. And like, it's either someone calling someone else to talk about Nell, or someone calling Nell, and then we do like a cut to a Nell scene, and then Nell in that scene thinks back to the past, and in the past she's having a memory with Shirley, so then we cut from the Nell scene to a Shirley scene, and then Shirley remembers something in the past, and that pushes to this, and we kind of, and it's just like, if you look in detail on how like we just kind of weave through each and every one of these scenes, which have so much heavy lifting to do as far as establishing character and world and things, it's just really, really well done. It just really is. I was kind of shocked when I like really just looked at it from the 500-foot level.
Totally. It's weaving all these things together, but it's also, like you said, keeping a really good pace and a good like variety to it, keeping us pulled along. Yeah. And on top of all that, like we said a bit ago, it's actually Steve who sort of feels like the focal character of this episode, despite the fact that Nell is this connective tissue. Yeah. It's like we don't really, she's actually mysterious. We don't like, what's going on with Nell is the mystery of the episode.
Yeah.
And yet she is the thing that binds the whole episode together. Is that's just such a fascinating. It's like there's two stories sort of layered on top of each other at an angle, and you're trying to see one of them through the slats of the other. It's fantastic. It's so tightly written. I love it.
And yeah, it's so economical too, and how we convey information about characters and even change in character, right? Like one of the things I'm thinking of is in that opening sequence of the show, right after adult Steven reads the Hill House opening, we cut to young Steve waking up in bed to Nellie crying in the other room. He gets out of bed. He walks over there. Theo briefly comes out of a room and he says, "No, go to bed, Theo. Like, I got this." And like, that is young Steve Crane being the eldest kid who is taking care of his siblings. Like, Nell's crying. I'm the eldest. I'm going to go there. Theo says, "Should I wake mom and dad?" He goes, No, I got it. And then eventually Hugh does come in, but like, that's like, Steve was going to try to handle it himself. Same thing in the treehouse scene later with Luke, right? Where like, he's going to talk to Luke. He's like having this bonding session with Luke. He's being the older brother. He's being the eldest child. And we understand that's kind of the dynamic of how the kids worked, that Steve was the eldest. Like we learn that through Liv, like Steve learned, he's read the Bible, he's read the Torah, he's like he's well versed in everything. He's the smartest one. He was taught to be rational by his mother. He was taught to be curious and think. And we just firmly establish him as kind of like the head of the family, or at least of the children. And then we fast forward to present day, and he's not that at all. In fact, Shirley has an argument with him about that very thing of like when he's just kind of passing the buck on the responsibility of Nell, which is the opposite of what he did as a kid. Shirley's like, you're right, I'll deal with it because I'm the oldest. Oh, wait, that's you. And so like, it's just very economical in how we quickly establish a character. And then we very quickly in their adult form establish how that dynamic has changed. And I think it's just very, very, very well done.
Yeah. The most heartbreaking thing to me in the whole episode, in some ways, I guess, and maybe this is because I have the thing with brothers specifically is my kryptonite, as you're aware, is like we have that incredibly beautiful scene with him and his little brother in the treehouse, which is just like this like warmly lit, like environment of safety and comfort and understanding. And he's sort of emotionally taking care of his brother and just being an absolute fantastic big brother. And then we contrast that with years later, he sees Luke on the stairs, assumes that Luke has just robbed his house, which seems like there's no other explanation than yes, Luke robbed his house, but Luke keeps saying it's not what you think.
Yeah, Luke, let's be clear here. Luke not only has robbed his house, but it's been firmly established that Luke is an addict. And we were told he just got his 90-day trip, but the Luke we see here doesn't look good, right? Yeah. Like he looks like he's high, essentially.
Yeah, and but again, he keeps insisting it's not what you think. He says it like twice.
Yeah.
And if this was not a horror show, then I would be like, well, he's just lying. But because this is a horror TV show, you're inclined to think, okay, something else is going on with Luke. And it's tragic that Steve is not even considering the possibility that maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe you should listen to Luke, and maybe in the way that you just didn't listen to Nell. Nobody picked up the phone for Nell, and now she's dead. Now Luke needs your help. He's not even asking for help, but he clearly needs your help.
Yeah.
And you're just going to say, you're going to give him, $50 and tell him to get lost. And that's super tragic.
Kind of the inciting incident for Nell when she called Shirley was like, I'm worried about Luke. Like something's going on with Nell, right? Something was going on that leads her back to the house and eventually to her death. But the primary moment when she called Shirley, the thing she said was, I'm worried about Luke. So yeah, we should be worried about Luke too. We don't know why. These characters, and not just Steve, by the way, I think we see it from Theo as well, that they're just kind of fed up with Nell and Luke. And I think Theo is a little bit more fed up with Luke than Nell, but they're just like Theo's whole speech to her sister is all about boundaries. You need to establish boundaries and walls and like you can't be responsible for these things. And it's like these are relationships that we see at the beginning of the show as kind of fundamentally broken. And we can assume that it was the events of the haunting and then how it spiraled out from there that have broken this family apart. And it's like maybe we'll fill in some of the blanks of exactly how that broke apart, but like the cool thing is we in some cases we almost don't need to. Like there's just enough there to know like why Steve is just tired of bailing Luke out all the time. Right. And it's sad. Like it's very sad. You're absolutely right. I think what Flanagan does is he mirrors he uses flashbacks very, very well, right? Like flashbacks have a storytelling purpose because they inform on another scene. So we have the flashback of him and Luke in the treehouse, and then we cut immediately from there to the confrontation in the stairwell when Luke is stealing his stuff. So we have that flashback and how that relationship was defined in our minds when we're watching how how Steve is dealing with his brother in the present. And yeah, it makes it even more heartbreaking for sure.
Yeah. Because especially just the way that Luke is reacting, where he's like he's aware of the fact that his brother has given up on him, essentially, but he clearly still loves his big brother,
Mhm.
That's what's sad about it to me.
It is very sad. Yeah. And we haven't mentioned the actors very much yet. I just like all these actors are really good. Like Mikael Huisman, I think is how you pronounce his name, plays Steve. He was Dario in Game of Thrones. I don't know if you remember that. But
That's Steve.
yeah.
Oh, that Dario. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they have two actors for Dario? I don't remember which
No,
which Dario
he was
version
the second Dario.
I
For
think
some
he was
reason,
the
I was
second
like,
Dario,
I don't
yeah.
think he was the first Dario. Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah, and then Shirley is played by Elizabeth Reeser, who we saw in Ouija, I believe. Or am I thinking that? No, she played the mother in Ouija, which is fun because young Shirley is played by Lulu Wilson, who played her daughter in Ouija. Theo Crane, of course, played by Kate Siegel. Like perfect.
Yeah.
Like everything I know about Kate Siegel and the type of actor she is, like Theo is just perfect for her. And by the way, I have to tell you, and maybe we can transition to talking about the Theo scene a little bit here, because we do get a little bit of Theo in this episode. I said that like the Catherine Zeta-Jones version of Theo was the one I imagined. And I said that specifically because I didn't want to spoil anything about the show for you. But like, since I watched the show, just like Kate Siegel is Theodora, like she just is in my mind.
I get it. I can definitely see. I mean, even though she's not in this episode a ton, I can see all those colors that she's painting with.
So talk to me about Theo a little bit here, because yeah, you're right. We get very little of her, but I think what we get here is actually pretty interesting. So we start with her in a club. The subtext of her lesbianism in the Shirley Jackson novel is gone because it's 2018 now. We don't have to hide that. We can just do it.
Yes.
And so yeah, she's gay. We learn that very quickly. I'm really fascinated by that scene with in the club where she meets the girl, though, because tell me if I'm wrong about this, but like there is part of this that Flanagan shoots as kind of like a horror sequence, which I found really interesting because like similar to what he does at the very end of the episode where we know Nell is in the corner and then he turns around and boom, Nell is right in front of us. That's kind of a similar thing that happens with Theo, where he and this girl are kind of eyeing each other, or she and this girl are kind of eyeing each other from across the club. The girl like looks down and looks up again over to where, and Theo's gone. Yeah. She's not there anymore. And then the camera pans after Theo says, "Hey," and suddenly she's like right there, right in front of her. And there was like, I'm probably trying to read too much into this, but there was definitely something very specific about how that was shot.
Well, here's the thing. You can make fun of me later if I'm wrong about this, but my interpretation of this is that it's meant to be unsettling and uncanny because it is supernatural. Because Theodora is psychic. And I think, look, like I'm super biased toward this interpretation because we just read the book and that was our pretty consistent throughout the whole reading interpretation, is that whatever else is going on, Theodora is actually able to read minds.
Yeah.
Like setting aside everything else, the one supernatural thing that I feel pretty sure about is Theodora could read minds. And what I interpret happening in that scene is they make eye contact. Theodora reads her mind and is like, she wants me to go over there. She's going to play coy though, but I'm Theodora, so I'm just going to immediately walk over there, and then we're gonna shack up, and then the way the scene progresses is Theodora very quickly is like, all right, you can go now. I have work tomorrow. And then when she goes and she talks to her sister afterward, her sister's kind of criticizing her for her behavior.
Yeah, she says frat guy behavior.
Yeah, she says frat guy behavior. She's like, are you going to see her again? And Theodora says, no, way too many issues or something like that.
Yeah, pile of issues.
And they didn't have a single conversation. So whatever issues Theodora thinks she knows about must also come from telepathy. So this is my case for Theodora can read minds in this book, movie, show, TV show.
Sometimes it's fun when I don't have to point things out for you, like the pile of issues line, and you just catch that yourself. I am not confirming nor denying anything you just said there. But I think that line did jump out to me as well. And yeah, like it's definitely, I think you're right. Like the one thing that the way Flanagan films that scene establishes that Theo is not the type of person that's going to like play games or wait around. Like she sees what she wants and she's just going to go for it. And that's what she does.
Yeah.
And then when she doesn't want it anymore, gone.
Yeah. But just to ground out, I mean, I think that you're right that it is kind of a jump scare because it's meant to emphasize like, that's weird.
Yeah.
You're meant to notice that as being weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, we see she's living in Shirley's like funeral home apartment. So like they at least those two seem like they're doing okay relative to the rest of the family. Like they're at least hanging out near each other.
It's actually good for a relationship when you can like criticize each other, you know. When you're afraid to criticize each other, that's bad. And so it seems like they're at least friends. So
yeah. I really like her character introduction here. Like there's not much else she does there, but it's like, again, just like economy of storytelling. We establish her. We know we understand what her relationship with Shirley is. We quickly understand that her relationship with Nell is fractured. She says, "I haven't spoken to her in LA. I'm waiting for her to apologize to me." Don't know.
What? Yeah.
Don't know for what there, but that relationship is fractured. Like we're kind of what we're seeing here is like what Nell does in this episode is she calls her big brother first, right? She calls the big brother. She calls the head of the group of children first. He sends her to voicemail. Then he calls his eldest sister, Shirley, or she calls her eldest sister, Shirley. She doesn't answer either. She can't call Theo because her and Theo aren't speaking. She can't get a hold of Luke. And then finally, like her last ditch effort moment is to call her father. And her father, Hugh, is the only one that takes the threat to her safety seriously, right? Like he has a very, very visceral reaction to the conversation with her. All she says to him is like, "Daddy, the bent neck lady is back." And he immediately reacts. He's like, "Get to your brother right now. I'm getting on a plane. I'll be there tomorrow." And he just goes and boom, he's off. And we don't really understand the why of that, but like it's the why almost doesn't necessarily matter because that'll be filled in later. What it's doing is it's establishing how this family works and operates now. That no one was there for Nell. She had no one to turn to. And it was too late. It was all too late. And now she's gone. And is the same going to happen to Luke now? Like he's next, I guess, technically.
Yeah. Or maybe something was happening to Luke. I don't know. I don't have enough to go on here. It is really interesting that she called her father last. That is a thought I keep returning to.
Yeah.
Because, a minute ago you said something about like how we don't really know what happened to the family, and I was kind of thinking like, well, I don't think I even need to know the details to know that like when a mother commits suicide and then the father does this weird combination of like refusing to talk about it, but maybe implying that he genuinely thinks that it's ghosts. Then you're just going to be like that's a lifetime of trauma for you to sort of metabolize right there. And your dad is just not going to be somebody that you can rely on.
Yeah.
I think, even if he's right, like here's the thing is they don't realize that he's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
I mean, the most we get is Shirley like says to give him the benefit of like when he said those things, he believed them. It's not like he was just bullshitting or like he like full-throatedly believed the things he was saying and perhaps still does. I mean, we do get that scene where he wakes up in the middle of the night and the ghost of his dead wife is in bed with him, which I think harkens back to the earlier scene that they cut short where they're in bed together. Now, is that like we could play with that as that's just a dream, like he was just having a nightmare, or we could say that no, like he's still haunted by Liv every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like we know the only thing we know for sure is that his relationship with Steve is fractured, and it is because he refuses to talk to Steve about what happens. I think when Hugh calls his son on the phone, what he says to him is, "Dad, there's no reason you and I need to talk. Like, don't call me." Essentially, like, why you can't just call me? We are not talking.
Yeah.
And so, it feels like all of the kids' relationship with their father is strained. Steve the most. But yeah, I mean, we can kind of feel that out, that Dad lives all the way down in Florida. Everyone else lives in either Massachusetts or out on the West Coast. I don't get the feeling that people are hopping on a plane and driving and flying down to Florida to visit their father very often.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So let's talk a little bit about. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the intro sequence, like for the title sequence of the show. I just wanted to get your read on it, because it's really interesting. Like, one thing we see is that there are statues like in this version of Hill House, there are statues everywhere. It feels like Flanagan took the image of the one creepy giant statue in the parlor and then like turned it up to 11, and it feels like especially in that scene when Nell is dancing through Hill House, which, by the way, I bet you weren't expecting Eleanor dancing crazily in Hill House in episode 1 of the show.
No, it was not.
Also, I don't know if you noticed it, but the Oculus mirror is on the wall.
I did notice the Oculus mirror, yes.
I'm proud of you. Good job.
Finally noticed something.
But so, like, there are statues everywhere throughout this house. And the introduction to the title credits show like crumbling statues. It's like all these statues are like flaking marble and crumbling. And then we kind of zoom out to the house as a maze. Some really powerful imagery there. I'm wondering what you thought about it.
I mean, it's a lot of cool, creepy imagery. The statues just make me feel like okay, so I don't know that I thought about this consciously at all yet, actually, but I was kind of getting this vibe of like, this is a house that has maybe chewed up and spat out a number of different, groups of people over time. And we don't know anything about this yet, but I feel like if there's a bent neck lady, that means there's at least one, horrible thing that already happened in this house. And then there's something up in the red room. And, there are other ghosts.
We see some little feet. We see some little feet behind the door of the red room.
See some feet. We see a variety of other ghosts, which I probably missed like 90% of these ghosts that were in the background of shots. But
let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Actually, finish your point, and then we'll circle back to the hidden ghosts.
I think all I was really getting at is like the statues kind of symbolize these souls that the house has claimed.
Yeah.
I don't know why I even say that. It's just a vibe, I guess.
That vibe feels right to me. I like that. Just the idea, like what is a statue essentially, but like a way of honoring or remembering a person. And they're all statues of people, and they're all various levels of screaming. Like, there's a lot of. I sent you a picture earlier of the mantle at Hill House and the fireplace. As Hugh and Mr. Dudley are trying to fix it, and Shirley walks in, and there's a lot of like normal looking faces on the mantle, and then there's just one that's just like screaming in pain. It's just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's just like really great production work, I think, in the show. Like, I really like the look of and the feel of the house. I think it's really good. Yeah. I also really like Flanagan's twist on the doors thing. Like in the book Hill House, the doors couldn't seem to stay open, right? You would open a door, and then it would seem to magically shut. In Flanagan's version of Hill House, it seems like the doors won't stay shut. Yeah. That like in that opening sequence, the door to Nell and Luke's room just kept opening.
I wanted to talk about that scene. I know we're kind of like several layers deep of nesting in this conversation, but like,
it's all good, man.
The way that's shot, where it's a very specific sequence of shots where the father goes in, gives the pep talk to Nell, and then he goes back into the hall, and it's like a wide shot that's like very pulled back in a way, and it's kind of showing you see the hall going off into the distance, and then you see him in kind of the middle, and the door is just huge. By the way, this door is like a 16-foot tall door. Like, it's everything in the house is huge. That's one thing I noticed is he's an adult man, but he's wearing like PJs, Yeah. And he looks like a little boy, framed against this giant hallway. Part of it is the PJs, part of it is the massive scope of the hallway.
Yeah.
And anyway, he pulls on the door, like you said, and then turns, and just due to the fact that the camera kind of lingers while he moves out of the frame, it kind of lingers. And then later when we cut back, we didn't see the door open. We just see that the door is now open.
Yeah.
And there's other stuff happening in the scene, but because you're so like keyed up by the darkness and the weirdness of everything, you immediately notice that the door is open. I love how Flanagan directs our attention.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't do anything explicit, or like there's not like a little corny inset shot that shows the door or whatever. It just shows the hallway again, the same exact shot from before, except now the door is open and we see the Hugh Crane walk out, see the door, react. But we already noticed that, right? I don't know. I love that. I love that.
Well, and then as he goes back to his bedroom, like he closes the door and like pushes against it, and really great sound work when he like pushes against the door, just like it feels like the whole house groans against that. And he walks out of frame, and the camera doesn't just sit there. It kind of starts to push in almost as if we're in the POV of the ghost, the Bentnick lady, let's say. And it's it's slowly walking back towards the door to open it again. But before we get there, we cut away and do the sequence of him and Liv talking in bed. And then when we cut back to Nellie's room again, the first thing we see is the doors open again. Yeah. And that's when we get right before the opening credits, we get the first shot where we see the Bentnick lady like in shadow behind her back, and then slowly push forward into the light just a little bit, which is a great, again, economy of storytelling. This great early moment to establish that yes, there will be ghosts in the story. That like this unlike Shirley Jackson's novel where the ghosts are kind of always implied and not directly seen. It's the 21st century now. We got to actually show some ghosts, and there will actually be ghosts in the story.
Yep, love it.
Yeah, I love that whole sequence. I love everything with like the Luke and Nellie of it all. Like, Luke, why are you awake? Because Nellie's awake. It's just like I love all of that. The kid who plays young Luke is like such an adorable little kid.
Yeah.
And then the reveal of the Bentnick lady there is just very, very effective and spooky. And then I think the only thing I don't like about that scene, Matt, is Henry Thomas's contacts. So what they did in the show is that they made the choice, obviously for the kids and the adults of the kids, they chose to recast, or not chose to recast. They had to have different actors because some were children and some were adults. But they made the choice with Hugh to cast Henry Thomas as the past version of Hugh, and then Timothy Hutton as the present day version of Hugh, which is a really interesting choice, right? Like, there's a world in which you just put old age makeup or special effects on Henry Thomas and just call it a day, right? They chose not to do that, and I think that's really interesting. And that, jumping ahead a little bit, like when we get to Dr. Sleep, Flanagan makes the choice to not like do a horrible CGI young Jack Nicholson, and instead, who does he cast? He casts Henry Thomas to play young Jack Nicholson. I think he's just really committed to like performance and like not kind of caking layers of makeup or special effects on a person to affect their performance. And so the most reasonable thing was to just recast. And just like there's two different actors, and he just like he has faith that the audience will just say, yes, this is Hugh Crane when he's younger, and that's Hugh Crane when he's older. And I think, yeah, like watching television requires a certain level of suspension of disbelief. Getting back around to my point though, Timothy Hutton has blue eyes. Henry Thomas has brown eyes. And so at some point in the production, the decision was made that we're going to give Henry Thomas blue contacts to make his eyes match Timothy Hutton's. And my personal opinion is the effect doesn't work, and I find his eye color very distracting. I think what happened to me is by the end of the episode, and indeed by the end of the show in general, you just kind of get used to it and you don't notice it anymore. But that initial scene, the first time I watched the initial scene with him walking in and talking to Nell about the dreams spilling over and kids have an ocean of dreams, there was something that felt off and stilted about the scene for me, and I was like, it can't be Henry Thomas's acting because I love his acting so much. It can't be that. And I realized it was his eye color, that it was just, there was something uncanny about it for me that was just putting me off just enough to pull me out of the scene a little bit.
That's really interesting because when you're looking at somebody's acting, you're really looking at their face, and you're really, the eyes are basically the center of the face. So you're really scrutinizing that. And yeah, colored contact lenses are really imperfect in a lot of ways.
Yeah, especially when you're going from like a dark brown to a lighter color.
Yeah,
like I wonder if it's just like they were like, all right, which of you two wants to wear contacts to make your eyes look another? And one of those two people was Timothy Hutton. It was just like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Have you ever worn colored contact lenses?
I haven't. No.
So I got many years ago, I got like red contact lenses for a Halloween thing.
Interesting. Okay.
And number one, they're like 10 times more uncomfortable than normal contact. Like I used to wear.
Because they're thicker, right?
They're thicker, and they're so thick, in fact, that like if I were to do like a heavy blink, like I'm doing right here on the video, then you would actually see them like boing. Like if you were looking at my eyes, you would see them moving around very, very noticeably. And it was a weird, and also it restricted my vision. Like my peripheral vision was garbage. So I'm just remarking all these things because it's like, maybe if you've never worn colored contact lenses, you just assume it's like, oh, it's like contact lenses, but they're colored. No. If they're any kind of meaningful color, like a significant color change, like going from brown to blue would be, then they are thick, they are uncomfortable, and they move around when you blink. And so that's just a fact of the matter. And possibly on some level, you're picking up on some of these things when you're seeing the way he moves his eyes in slightly unusual ways, maybe something like that. Just a thought.
Yeah, that could be. And there's part of me that like is just like, okay, we're already doing this suspension of disbelief to believe that when Henry Thomas gets 30 years older, he's going to look like Timothy Hutton, which is like already we're like, no, that's not going to happen. Like we're already willing to do that. Like there's a part of me that's just like, this is probably not necessary. I don't. Only the worst people in the world will be people that would notice and care about that kind of thing. And just let's let them have different color eyes. No one's going to notice.
Yeah, I'm sure I wouldn't have noticed, but I think maybe if I were in the room, I would guess that somebody was like, okay, look, we're asking a lot of people to connect this character to this character, and this actor to this actor, and this actor to this actor. Let's just help them out a little bit by bridging the eye colors. I mean, it's funny. Do the child actors and the adult actors even have the same eye colors? This isn't the kind of thing that I notice. I just don't notice.
Yeah. I'm so bad at eye color. Like you could ask me, like right now, my coworkers at work that I see every day, what color are their eyes? I could guess, but I don't know. So yeah, I don't think I just pay attention enough to do that.
I remember being a kid in like grade school and like filling out a questionnaire. It was like Mother's Day, and I was filling out like a questionnaire about my mom, and it was like, what color are her eyes? And I was like, brown.
Okay, I know my family's eye colors. I know my wife's eye color. I know my children's eye color, but
I do now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because you say like we need to sell the fact that these are the same character. The show does do this thing where it does like a very Oculus-esque match cut where as Timothy Hutton's Hugh Crane is like frantically packing a bag to go help out Nell, we cut to young Hugh Crane, played by Henry Thomas, frantically going into Steve's room that's like the night of their escape from the house. And we do a match cut there as if through the language of cinema to tell people like, just so in case you had forgotten, these are the same people.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of we do general match cuts. Like we cut back and forth between young Nell and then Victoria Pedretti's version of the character, like in similar positions as to really just sell like Like you need to be told these things. Like it's one thing to know it, and like they're calling them by the same name, but like you can use the language of filmmaking to help that transition along.
Yeah.
With that in mind, like we spent a lot of time talking about Steve. One thing we haven't talked about is our introduction to adult Stephen Crane, which I think is really great. So we have this sequence, and this is another thing that was cut and truncated in the Netflix version that you watched. There is a extended monologue with this woman, Mrs. Walker, who is telling a ghost story, essentially. Like she's telling about the death of her husband and then what she saw a night, I guess a couple weeks ago or whatever, when she saw his ghost hanging from the ceiling. And in the version you saw, this is a much shorter monologue, and it's cut up by, I don't know if you even noticed this, but like it randomly cuts to the recording device. Like he's recording the conversation on his iPhone, and like it will randomly cut to his iPhone just as she's talking to show that the recording is happening. It will also randomly cut to him like writing in his notebook. Those cuts are to disguise the slicing up of this monologue they did, because the way Flanagan shot this monologue with this woman is that it was this extended several minute story, and it starts in a wide, and then it slowly pushes into her as the story intensifies, and we get to the ghost, and by the end of this thing, it's like it's in a close up of her. And it was basically decided that this is too long. This is the pilot. This is not even a character that's going to like recur on the show. And we spend a lot of time on this. And so we need to chop it up. And then, but because it was a continuous take, they couldn't just chop it up, right? They had to hide those cuts somewhere. And I listened to the commentary on this, and you could tell Flanagan like hates the cuts, because he's like, yeah. And then here we cut to like, the phone, so everyone knows it's still recording. Why do we care about that? It's just like he not fully happy with cutting that stuff out, and I completely understand why, because the actress who does that monologue like kills it. It's beautiful, it's powerful, and I think this is something like the reason why this is in the show is because this is a story about ghost stories. This is a story about people's experiences with things they don't understand. And to do this like heavy, long monologue of this woman telling a character a ghost story, and we don't cut to any images of what she saw, right? Like there's a version of the ghost story where in order to get us, the viewer, to see what she's seeing, we just cut to her as she's talking. We relive her experience at night, and you get a scare out of it, right? You can get like a cool, cheap scare out of it. We don't do that. And so what we're left to, and Flanagan talks about this on his commentary, is we're left to our imagination. We're left to just, in our head, imagine what she's saying and what that was like. And the cool thing that does is later in the episode, when the water starts dripping on him, what we're seeing in that moment is not something we've seen before. What we're seeing in that moment is our imagination of what is about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We expect there to suddenly be a ghost there, and we haven't seen what the guy looks like. We haven't seen what that will, but it's all in our head. It's all in our imagination. And I think what matters here is that is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, right? It's your imagination. It's not what you've seen, because we don't see anything in that book. There's no, okay, we kind of do, sort of. But for the most part, the things that happen in that book are just required to imagine. And I love that he's establishing that connecting thread here in the very, 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 very beginning of that story. I think it's incredible. I love it. Love it so much.
Yeah. That's awesome, because I was also thinking, while you were even explaining this, I had this little flicker of almost disagreement, where I was like, no, we saw it, didn't we? And then, you know, it was a very small flicker, because I was like, no, I know we didn't. We absolutely didn't.
Yep.
But like you said, when the water drop falls on his head, you're just like, oh, the camera's going to turn and there's going to be a horrible dead guy hanging from the ceiling, and you see it in your mind, and then it's just nothing. There's nothing.
Yeah. But so to get back to the point of bringing up that scene, though, we go through that whole monologue with her, and it is only until after she is done and he turns off the recording that the camera does this tilt up and we actually get the reveal of Stephen Crane. It's like this very specific and targeted choice to reveal him in this way. I think it's really fascinating. I think Flanagan compared it to the Rick intro in Casablanca. That just like you only see Rick from like over the shoulder and hands, and then it isn't until a certain moment that the camera finally allows you to see who this person is. And what that effect does is it just builds up their importance in your mind. Like you just it's the language of cinema saying like, oh, this guy's important and he matters to the story, and we're going to pay attention to him a little bit more because we've held on the reveal of what he looks like for a little bit.
Yeah, because the whole time you're listening to this monologue, while you may be paying attention to the monologue, part of you is wondering like, what is the context of this scene? Who is she talking
what are we doing
to and
here?
why?
Because the way the monologue is set up is we see a guy hit play on that recorder and then she starts talking. And then it's like, what are we doing here? What does that have to do with anything? We just cut from a spooky girl like leaning, a spooky ghost girl leaning over the shoulders of a little girl in a house, and now we're here listening to some guy talk to a woman about a ghost experience she had. What's going on now? And in fact, like there's several moments throughout the pilot where it uses like it'll say a location and then it'll say then and now on it. And the one on that scene with Mrs. Walker, we don't actually get that location and the now thing until after her monologue is over and after we've seen him. And then we cut to a wide of him sitting across from her in the chairs. And then that's when it pops up, as if it's like, we needed to go through all this first. And now we're actually starting.
Love that.
Yeah. Really cool. He's a really great actor. Like, I think he really it feels to me like he really understands this character. Mikhail, the actor who plays him.
Yeah, well, he plays a very it's a fine line where there are elements of his character that are kind of unlikable on paper. I think you described him as arrogant a while ago. He, especially if you're the kind of person who's more open to the supernatural, his constant like literal eye rolls and skepticism probably is a little bit grating. Like and then there's the element where like, you know, his mom has sort of trained him to be this like internet atheist warrior from childhood.
To quoting Shakespeare, quoting Hamlet.
So like he's slightly insufferable, but the actor brings a huge amount of just like humanity. I think is really all it is, where it's like you can see that he's suffered a lot. His life has just been a disappointing slog, and he's been worn down. And really, what like you want to see. I know this is a Mike Flanagan production, so I shouldn't get too optimistic in terms of the narrative and how the characters are going to end up. But like, you want to see him like rise above this. Like you want to see him take back his seat as the good older brother who's going to take care of his siblings. That's what I want for him. I feel like that's what I'm supposed to want for him. Whether that's going to happen or not, obviously, is unknown.
I agree, and I think it's interesting. Like, one of the scenes that they cut that was in the director's cut version was when he's driving home. You know, he has that call with Lee where he the at my house, the house. After that, he calls his agent, and there's a brief phone call with his agent where he's talking about the interview with Mrs. Walker and the potential book they could make from it. And he's like very, very like callous about the whole thing. And like, what we could turn it into is like, oh, well, I don't know if there's enough at the house there, but maybe we could turn it into like ghosts of like horrible car accidents thing. And then an interesting thing happens where his agent says, you know what would really sell? People want to know what's going on with your family. People want to know what's going on with Hill House and your family now. And that book would sell. And he refuses. He says, no, he's not doing that. So like, that was a moment I think that like you have the difficult sides of him, the arrogant sides of him, the sides of him that would maybe turn characters off from him. But I think there was maybe like a very like intelligently put moment that didn't even make it to the final episode of like, here's a way to be a little bit more sympathetic to him. Because he was willing to cross that line the first time, but he is resisting crossing that line again.
Mhm.
Like he almost realizes that the choice he made to prioritize his career over his family was a wrong choice, but it's kind of too late now. But he's not going to do it again.
I think I kind of like this being cut out because it allows him to start at a little bit of a lower place,
Mm-hmm.
and if he is going to get to sort of elevate, if the shape of his arc is we start low and then we go up, and then maybe we go low again. I don't know, but like I think it's okay to start low, because a lot of the episode just makes him seem like a failure.
No, I think I agree with that. I think that maybe that was why it was originally cut from the show, is that they realized they didn't need it. But you can kind of understand like the desire to be like, oh, are we making him too unlikable? Like, like there's always a risk that like in trying to build this character and beginning him at his lowest point, you just turn people off from him. And then there's nowhere to go from there. So I can kind of understand why they built that in. But yeah, I think ultimately I still like him. One thing Flanagan said in the director's cut commentary that I think is worth talking about here is he identifies, like, he's all over this story and all these characters, but the character that I think he feels is closest to him is Steve. And maybe that's why he chose to start with him. And I like what you said earlier. We were talking, I probably should have brought this up then, but we were talking about like the exploitation of a person not really believing in these stories and yet telling these stories anyway. That's kind of Mike Flanagan. Like, he is a skeptic. Like, he does not believe, like, I think he would agree with your and I's like opinion on, are there ghosts in the world? Like, maybe he would be a little less like pig-headed and arrogant about it as Steve is, and sometimes we can be, where we're just like have absolute certainty. But I think he generally would fall on the side of skepticism, that like there's probably a rational explanation for these things. And so essentially he is a person that doesn't believe in this stuff, and yet he's like trading in stories of it in the same way that Steve is. And I think he says this in the commentary, that's like Steve in many ways is like my worst fear about myself. Like, am I that person? Am I the person that exploits people's stories? Because, when this as a writer, right? You write about whatever, you bring a lot of your life experiences into it, and you bring a lot of your relationships into it. And so if you're a person writing about a family, you're going to bring a lot of your family into it, whether consciously or unconsciously.
It's just what you know.
And so like is by writing and producing and creating The Haunting of Hill House as a show about a family, is Mike Flanagan exploiting his family in the exact same way Steve Crane exploited his? I think the answer to that is probably no, but like clearly this was a concern of his and an idea of his in his mind while working on this.
Right. I mean, I think it's an interesting and like useful question to bring up here. And I think my answer is just like, no more than any writer can be said to be exploiting.
Sure.
Which maybe the answer is yes, like a non-zero amount, but not so much that it would worry you.
Yeah.
Or maybe sometimes it should. Maybe sometimes it should. If one of your loved ones is an author, you're gonna be a little nervous when you're reading their works, because you never quite know this character. I notice that there's some qualities to this character that I find familiar. So
who would you say this person was based on?
No one. Yeah.
But I also think like his idea of like a ghost can be a lot of things: a memory, a daydream, a secret, grief, anger, guilt. But in my experience is mostly they're just what we want to see. Most times a ghost is a wish. I think that feels like a good thesis statement on the show in a lot of ways. And the question is like, obviously ghosts on top of being all those things are also real things that exist in the world of the show. Right. But I think Steve kind of echoing the thesis statement of the show while being the character that is closest to the writer of the show makes a lot of sense in my mind.
So, but I feel like we're not simply meant to take Steve at his word here too, because
totally, yeah,
because you're what Mrs. Walker says in that scene is, I you're saying I wish to see my husband like that, and then he kind of plays it off in a way where I think even in the moment I was like, I don't really buy his response, and I don't know that I meant to, and then you think
he says
like,
something to the effect of like, because seeing him like that is better than never seeing him again, right?
Yeah, right. But then I'm like, okay, so we're meant to assume that little child Nell is wishing to see the Bentnet lady. Like, no, she's not. The ghosts in this story.
Importantly, he doesn't believe that Nell saw anything, right? Like,
right. So he's actually just what he's doing. I mean, this is like not very generous to Steve, which is funny because I don't dislike his character, but this is just like, I think the read on him is his whole life has been about like putting layers of armor around this idea of something terrifying and supernatural happened to me as a child and my family. And it's just like, no, it didn't. It's all rational. It's all totally explainable and sane. And I know and that's what he's doing in this scene is he's almost just like the way he's sort of like patiently, almost condescendingly explaining to her his perspective. It's like, this is just his mantra that he rehearses to himself.
Yeah.
So that he can sleep at night.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think it is really important to take everything he says with a grain of salt, even that the beautifully, I really like the idea of like a ghost can be a memory, a daydream, a secret, grief, anger, guilt. I love that conceptually. But one of the things the show does is show him by the end of the first episode that he is wrong about this, that ghosts are real, that they exist, that these things, it's not just this simple rational explanation. There's something more going on here. And that causes us to have to take like a step back, causes us and perhaps Steve to have to take a step back and reevaluate everything that he knows and everything that we know about him. So yeah, I mean, I think that lends you to doubt the credibility of everything he's saying. And it is delicious how confident and convinced he was, because again, I think in the instance of Mrs. Walker's husband, he was probably right there, right? Like, I mean, maybe not, maybe he was half right, and maybe like her husband's ghost still was there. Like, one thing that I do want to mention is like people in this story talk about how they're having ghost experiences a lot. Like, I'm thinking about little Max at the funeral home when we're introduced to Shirley, when she's like, don't you want to see your grandmother again in the wake? And he's like, no, I see her every night when she's sitting there staring at me with her unblinking eyes. It's like, Jesus Christ. But like, it seems like people are having these experiences a lot, and we know that at least some of them are real.
Yeah, maybe there's like a difference in, magnitude. Maybe to some degree it can be, there's like a spectrum between it's mostly wishful thinking and it's mostly a supernatural apparition that can, physically harm you.
Yeah. Well, just, I mean, to step back from a storytelling perspective, like the ghosts can be real, literal things that take place in the world and simultaneously be metaphors for our characters and have meaning outside of their literal existence, which I think is probably what the show is going to do.
Yeah. Right.
We haven't talked about Miss Dudley yet. Maybe we can briefly talk about Miss Dudley.
Yeah, maybe the Dudleys. We're not doing the thing where they're comically awful.
No.
They seem kind of nice.
I think Mrs. Dudley is still kind of creepy a little bit. I think part of that is just her character says some of the lines of from the book verbatim, like in the night, in the dark. Although she says them like a little tongue in cheek at times. I think the interesting twist on Mrs. Dudley is that this is how Flanagan gets his kind of religion ideas into the show, because she is in we learn in this first episode, like, staunchly religious, like that she is Christian, perhaps Catholic, like Jesus is the only way to salvation, like don't be like she's like dismissive of his understanding of everything.
And she dresses in a way that's old fashioned even for the 70s. I don't actually know.
We don't know, right? It was just all we get is then and now, so we don't actually know. I mean, we could assume
could be 90s. You could
assume
even.
80s, yeah.
could be the 70s, 80s, or 90s.
Yeah, I don't actually know.
Yeah, I'd have to do more math in my head than I can do right now. Point is, she's dressed old fashioned, but she's like, okay. So the thing that I took away from it is, like, she is respectful. She's kind of tongue in cheek. She is religious, but then when the mom shows up and like forcefully pushes back against her, she's like, my mistake. She backs off. She's not like, oh, we're going to have an argument about this. And it makes her likable. It actually makes the mom seem kind of aggressive and like rude, honestly, to have like stepped to her as if she's like wants to have a confrontation about this, and Miss Dudley's like, no, never mind, it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's part, like, I think we can assume that part of Stephen's arrogance and confidence in his understanding is from his mother, who's in that scene at least reflects a similar level. Like, there's a lot of connection between who Stephen is as an adult and that conversation with Liv. We see very little of Liv Crane in this episode, right? Like, we know she kills herself. We know, at least we think we know that, like, as they run out of the house, we get a brief shot of her dancing through the house. We think, that I mean, at least Steve says, I thought I saw mom upstairs, and Hugh is like, no, that's not your mom.
Yeah. My interpretation is like she's possessed or whatever.
Sure.
I didn't. What I saw was not dancing. What I saw was like a shambling, twisted form.
Well, I mean, that's a little judgmental. Are you like a choreographer, Matt? I didn't realize you were the expert on dance moves.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think probably we'll have more to say about Olivia Crane as we go. I love Carla Gugino. I'm glad to see she's in this. I like all the actors. I like all, like, I like, we are gonna, I don't think it's a spoiler to say we're gonna see more Nell, Matt, and I think Victoria Pedretti is a fun story because, like, this was like one of the first things she did. And Flanagan talks about this a little bit. He's talked about her many times, but like her story and how she got cast in this show is like, she made a tape and sent it in, and like, it was so good that it like got through like the 17 layers of like going from production assistants to passing assistants up all the way until it gets to the casting director, and the casting director likes it so much that they send it to Mike, apparently like the night before he was about to offer the role to someone else. And he watched the tape and was just like immediately, oh, that's Nell. It's just like there's like those stories that you hear about in Hollywood that everyone like wants to happen to them, but like never actually, you feel like never actually happens. And it actually happened to this woman, and she's gone on to have a great career after this. Like, she's constantly working, and I think she's remarkable in everything I've seen her in, and she's very good in this. And I know you haven't gotten to see a lot of it yet, but let's just keep an eye on her.
Cool.
Victoria Pedretti, she's really, really good.
Awesome. We'll do.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you wanted to talk about here? We've been going for quite a while. I don't think we thought we'd talk this long, but we shouldn't be surprised. Oh, I did have a couple more things. One was, I just have to point out the 90-degree camera turn that we do with young Nell. She's asleep on the couch and wakes up and sees the bent neck lady hanging above her, and we depict that through the camera turning 90 degrees. I actually was shocked to learn as I was listening to the director's commentary that this is a thing. Like, we knew this was a thing. We pointed this out as a thing. I didn't know that this was a thing in that, like, Flanagan and his cinematographer have a bet with each other that everything they do together, they will find a way to, as naturally as possible, work a 90-degree camera turn into it. And here's it in Hill House in the first episode.
That's great. I wanted to point out that we do a sort of like inverted jump scare thing twice.
Okay.
Where normally one of the characteristics of a jump scare is it's like, you know, a music sting accompanied by a visual lurch of some kind. But what we get first, I don't remember what order these things happen in, but one of them is the screeching car tire sound.
Mm-hmm.
And you are primed to think that this is like a scream, but no, it's car tires, and you see that it's a car. So it's like, but then you realize it's nothing, or it's just a car. And then the second one is when Hugh is having the dream that his wife is in bed with him, and he turns around and sees her face, and she opens her mouth and screams, but the scream this time is just the phone ringing.
Yeah.
So both of these are like a mundane, explainable, rational sound intruding into something that you expect to be a supernatural moment, which is sort of the inverse. That's why I call it an inverted jump scares. It's like, it was actually nothing.
Yeah.
Which maybe I'm trying to, decide if this is like a three-beat almost leading up to the last moment of the episode where it just is the jump scare, but there's not actually a sound there.
Yeah. No, let's just say yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Whether it was an intentional 3-beat or not, it is.
Yeah. Cool.
I think the thing I wanted to end on was the hidden ghosts. We said we were going to loop back around to that again, and then we just dropped it. So if people are watching this show for the first time and don't know, one of the things that the show has gotten most famous for is Flanagan and his production crew just decided at some point that they were going to hide as many ghosts in the background of frames as they possibly could. And they were never going to call attention to these ghosts. It was, and I think this does reflect a type of scare that Flanagan has always done, right? Where he's just like, you've talked about this before in some of the stuff we watch. I'm thinking of like Ouija in particular, of where he just like puts the scary thing in the background and then calls no attention to it whatsoever, which almost drives you even more crazy.
Yeah.
Well, basically the show does this where they just will take actors, put them in makeup and stick them in scenes, and they will just sit there and they will just be in the background. And there is in this, there's if you care enough to know, there's like lists out there that have compiled every instance of this happening in the show. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to like every week be like, where are the hidden ghosts? Like, I think it's a cool technique and trick, and it's fun, and I'm glad he did it because it just makes there's this otherworldly presence, but we don't have to actually like gamify it like that. But we do see 3 in this very first episode. So it is when Hugh and Steve are running down the stairs to exit the house. As they run down the stairs, you see on both sides of the stairs there are just 3 ghosts just standing there looking at them as they run out. It's pretty creepy. It's pretty creepy. It's
awesome.
Really cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That's a cool technique. I love it.
Yeah. I think Flanagan specifically said that anytime he sees people like say how many there are, how many they found, he will always respond, whether it's true or not, that there is one more that they have not found yet, which I think is a lot of fun.
That's great.
Yeah. It's a really cool thing. It is interesting that it became one of the most famous things about the show because it's like a way to kind of gamify the show that I'm sure Netflix loved because it encourages rewatches and you going and like, slowly going through the episode trying to find the still that shows where the ghost hidden in the background is. Yeah, I'm sure Netflix loved the hell out of that. But it is neat. It is a cool effect, and apparently was part of the original pitch. Is like, this is what I want to do with the show, and we're gonna put ghosts everywhere in the background.
Perfect.
All right, so that is episode 1 of The Haunting of Hill House. Steven sees a ghost, and he very much did.
Yeah.
So next week, we will pick up with episode 2, which is titled Open Casket. I think we can maybe assume who that episode is going to focus on, but maybe not.
Maybe not. We'll see.
We'll find out.
All right.
All right. We got a brief discussion question section before we wrap things up for the week, Matt. This was a question we asked a couple weeks ago as we got to the end of Shirley Jackson's novel, The Haunting of Hill House. We asked what?
We asked, is Hill House haunted? And we got a bunch of great answers. First from Baby Can You Dig Your Sam. This is the first time I've read this book, and I went into it believing that it was the quintessential haunted house book, the one that all other haunted house stories would be judged against. No one is more surprised than me to slowly discover that a Hill House isn't haunted at all. Eleanor is the one that is haunted by her loneliness, haunted by her trauma, haunted by her miserable family, haunted by her own psychic abilities, which she seems to be mostly oblivious of. The house itself isn't haunted, but it is a living thing that responds to the people inside. Perhaps as Eleanor is faced with her absolute reality, she is alone, she is unwanted, she killed her mother, and has nowhere else to go. She succumbs to insanity. Being stripped of her fantasies of living with Theo, of being part of a family, of a place that she feels like she belongs, she is confronted by her reality and is driven to suicide. Reading this definitely gave me even more appreciation of The Shining, which almost feels like a love letter to Shirley Jackson.
Yeah, which I think is exactly what you said last week. So very astute observation. Yeah.
Yeah, I particularly, I this is a point that I found myself wishing we had said more, is this idea that to drill down more on this idea of you can't remain sane in conditions of absolute reality.
Mm-hmm.
And actually thinking about that, because exactly what Sam says here, her reality is miserable. That's why she entertains herself with constant delusional thinking.
Yeah.
Confronting that absolute reality is what drives her mad, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I love that. I mean, I think that reflects like what I love is that a lot of the answers we got here, like say, well, what does it mean? What does haunted mean?
Mm.
Does it mean ghosts? Literal ghosts? Or does it mean ghosts in the way that maybe Steve talked about it, like on this episode?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, Pear Jane says, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but I believe in vibes. I mentioned bad design in a previous post. Crane designed Hill House to trap the natural flow of air through the space. He distorted angles as well, which at best would induce headaches, at worst, a sense of unreality. So when a mentally vulnerable person like Eleanor enters the picture, she can't resolve those bad angles or escape the weird energy that's bouncing off the walls. She's essentially living in a carnival funhouse. So while I'm not sure that Hill House is haunted, it's definitely haunting. And for Eleanor, that's enough. The very end reminds me of so much of the times when I've been in the grips of acute hypoglycemia. My brain tilts from I feel hungry to why won't anyone feed me? Why isn't anyone seeing I need to eat right now? I know I can get food, but I feel trapped in an echo chamber of needing it and feeling incapable of getting it myself. That's what I see in Eleanor, trapped in her head, desperately needing someone else to help her escape and wondering in the last minute why everyone has abandoned her. I love that. And I think, circling back around to that question we posed in both episode 3 and in our overview of like, why were those people so willing to just be like, no, she needs to go on her own? Like, I think Jane's answer here just kind of helped me see it, is that like, when you have people like this that are quote unquote difficult, there's this desire to kind of push off the responsibility and be like, I don't want to deal with this. Like, you're too tough to deal with. Like, again, like there's a lot of depression in this novel. And I think it's because Shirley Jackson suffered from depression herself for a very long time. And like, you do get a feeling of like, as a person who's been suffering from depression for very long, you can like see that the people around you are tired of dealing with you being depressed all the time, and they just don't want to deal with it anymore, and they just want to push that off you. And it's like, so in these moments where you need people more than ever, you need these people to come and help you. You feel powerless to help yourself, and you just feel them walk away from you or put you in a car and tell you to drive down the road.
Yeah. Reminds me of the beat from this episode we just talked about, where they're like talking about like, oh, they're called boundaries. You should try them. Like Shirley Jackson didn't have the concept of, or didn't have the word boundaries. But it's kind of the same thing. It's a little way we have of doing that. Yeah. Sugar Shillelagh says, I don't know if anyone pointed this out, but the book is called The Haunting of Hill House. It isn't called Haunted Hill House. I'm pretty sure every single word Shirley Jackson wrote was on purpose. We only ever see Hill House through Nell's eyes. Nell walked alone through the entire book because she never really met anyone where they were. She only met them through her distorted, depressed, intrusive thoughts. She haunted the halls. This book is super scary, but ultimately sad as hell. It's a damn mean trick to have someone play on you to find out the haunting is Nell. Now, I've never read any scholarship about the book, and I could be way off base. Every time I read it, I became more sure, though. This last time I found myself thinking that I hope ghosts really aren't real in this universe. I hate the thought of her walking alone forever. Yeah, this is another one of those thoughts that went through my head at some point and then escaped, and I never said, unfortunately. But the idea that the haunting of Hill House is the haunting just really means inhabitation. Yeah. That's what the word means. And the haunting of Hill House refers to these characters haunting Hill House.
Yeah.
I was thinking about all the characters. I wasn't just thinking about Nell, but yeah, I totally buy this take. Sure.
Yeah, that's great. Love that. Busy Dad 82 says, great episode. Definitely helped answer some of my questions. Oh, well, thank you. They also said, shout out to Casa Bonita. Fun story. I went there in 2015 after the Great American Beer Fest. The brewery I'd worked for at the time won a medal, and we went there after many beverages to celebrate. We got our food and sat down, and we noticed that someone in our party had made their way to the waterfall and started taking his clothes off. It was an unsanctioned jump, to put it mildly. Oh, Casa Bonita. Next time I come to Colorado, Matt, we're going.
We are.
Anyway, in regards to whether or not the house is actually haunted, I like to think that the house has some sentience, and it's delighting at both the idea of experiments and planchettes as attempts to prove that it's haunted, but also at torturing an already fragile young woman. It's giving her this warped idea of a safe and supportive home, but then taking her sanity and ultimately her life.
Yep.
I like it.
Makes sense.
I like that all of these are equally, like, I love them all.
Yeah, and none of them are really quite exactly what we said either, which is fantastic, right? I love that the book admits this many sort of cuts. Mm-hmm. Finally, from Borscht Enthusiast. It's not that hard. This was my second time reading the book. I feel like both times I did not pick up that this was all in Eleanor's head at all. I fully read this as a house being haunted and collecting ghosts, just like in The Shining. My interpretation is that this is that in this house, all the ghost timelines are intertwined. The end of the book, where she's running around banging on the doors, is the same banging sound her and Theo heard at the beginning. She was one of the ghosts she was experiencing. The bring Eleanor home was the house, since Eleanor belongs to it. Her weird space outs are the house messing with her, and it convinces her to commit, but let's go of her last moment, and she has a moment of clarity where she wonders why no one is stopping her. Her asking to move in with Theo is because she has given into the house. She already feels herself part of it now, but is desperate to have some way out. The Ghost Girls, I read that as child versions of the sisters and haunting the house because no way was that creepy dad not abusing them, and that could have left some mark on the home, ghosts without death involved. I do like the ink blot of a book description because both times I read it, it was like, why are they being so mean to each other? I personally get so paranoid sometimes when I'm convinced all my friends hate me, so I interpret her insecurity similar to my own. This was like a second layer of horror, meaning if I was feeling low and asked my friends for reassurance and they reacted like Luke or Theo, that's like my worst nightmare. I do see the option that she was just becoming really annoying. But maybe it was because, as the doctor said at the beginning, the house was trying to separate them. Maybe it was making them all irritable toward her, even more into the it's me versus them mindset, which would then push her closer to giving into the allure of Hill House. That being said, maybe I'll read it again in a few years and get a totally different read of it. The first time I read it was around 7 years ago. And because I'm so junked up on horror movies, I was like, this is boring. This time I read, I thoroughly enjoyed it and can see it for the masterpiece that it is. Glad I got a chance to read it again. Man, these answers are blowing my mind, Scott.
Yeah, I love them. I love them so much.
Because it's funny, you and I get so galaxy brain sometimes. It sort of like didn't even occur to me to just like straightforwardly think of it as a ghost story. But like I think Shirley Jackson has left that as a viable interpretation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts about the novel is that like each of these answers is completely plausible, and I buy it and I accept it as a valid and great interpretation. I've actually never heard what Borsch enthusiast said here about like the way that the timey-wimey-ness of it, and I really, really like that. I do.
Me too.
All right. Well, that was all of the answers or the selected answers we got for that one. Thank you, everyone, for sending those in. I think I was a little uncertain on if that was a valid, good question to ask, but I'm glad we asked it because that was really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Our question for next week, for 2 weeks from now, is going to be about this show. And what we're asking here is, what is your favorite pair of a child actor and adult actor playing the same character? So we see a lot of that in this story. They're all 5 children have different actors. And we want to know, there's plenty of instances of that throughout television and movies where that's been done. And we want to know what your favorite version of it is. Is it Hill House? Great. If you answer that way, please don't spoil anything past this episode. But if you like it somewhere else, let us know.
Yeah.
And that is going to do it for this week. As we said, next week, episode 2 of The Haunting of Hill House, Open Casket. We will be covering that episode just like we did this one. Matt, I can't wait for you to learn some more information and learn more about these characters. And I'm glad you're enjoying the show, and I'm having a great time. This is awesome. This is wonderful.
Me too. Definitely. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com. We also are on Twitter at flanaganswake19, on Blue Sky at flanaganswakepod, on Instagram at doofmedia, and the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is probably the best place to answer that discussion question and just hang out. And of course, remember, we are on YouTube. So come subscribe, give the episode a like and a subscribe if you want to be kept in the loop on Flanagan's Wake via YouTube.
Yeah, and don't forget the merch store, once again, doofmedia.myshopify.com for all of your Ghost Bear needs. Check it out.
That's right. And if you like Flanagan's Wake and you want to support us, then please consider donating to our Patreon account over at patreon.com/doofmedia. Always got some cool bonus content over there, kind of trying to increase the cadence of that these days, actually. So Go check that out. And of course, I thought I'd mention, we have a huge backlog of Stephen King adaptations that we discussed, which are exclusively available on the Patreon. So, if you listened to Kingslingers and you wanted more of that, well, that's basically what our patron-only podcast was for many, many, many months.
A real disgusting amount of hours of that. Like, it's pretty gross, actually, but also great, and you should go listen to it. So yeah, head on over there and sign up. And also, of course, there's plenty of people out there that cannot afford to support us financially. We totally understand that. I think right now would be a great time to like share this podcast as much as you can. We're covering The Haunting of Hill House. This is a big show. It's a big moment for us. It's a big moment for Mike Flanagan, and it's a very popular thing that we hope you guys would enjoy, and we know there's a lot of Flanagan fans out there that would enjoy. So if you can share this podcast with them, that would be really helpful. What is always helpful as well is leaving us rating and reviews on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on all of them. This week's spotlight review comes from the NOB, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Great analysis. Love the depth, the deep analysis, and chronological review. Short and sweet and very kind." Thank you so much for that review. And thank you to everyone who continues to send those in. Please keep them coming. I know we've probably got some Apple Podcast does this weird thing where you can only see the ones from your region, which I think is stupid. And then there's all these services out there that are eager to take your money. It was like, we'll show you reviews from other regions if you give us $10 a month. And I think that's silly. But so if we're missing yours, I'm working on a way to find yours if you're overseas and leaving us reviews and wondering why we've been ignoring you. We haven't been ignoring you. We appreciate your reviews. They do help us. Please keep them coming.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That is it. I am shocked at how much we talked about 60 minutes of television, but in a happy way, in an excited way, and I can't wait for more. So please check back next week as we continue with Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House. Rest in peace, Nell and Mr. Flanagan.